So welcome. Welcome so much. It's actually wonderful to see everybody in the waiting room, and that gets us here looking forward even more to the conversation. This conversation today is one that we have dreamed of for so long. So many people to work for so many years to try to find structures within the United Methodist Church in order to bring about the kind of structural and deep change needed to truly address creation and environmental justice in the church. And one of those mechanisms was to say, look, everybody's got to have a caretaker. Everybody's got to have somebody in their conference. That this is really where they are called for the sake of the conference and for the sake of every member of that conference and for the sake of the denomination, our earth, how we are together as people, it interconnects with everything we do. Speaking the word of God, speaking the hope of God, stepping out to do the work of God. And all that comes together in this position of a caretaker. So the General Conference passed this legislation saying that there should now be this caretaker in every conference. You might call it something a little different. That's fine. We're working this out. It's like we got a new car on the road and it's electric and efficient and mined with justice, and we've got this car and we're tweaking it. What do we need? What kind of roads will we need? Who's going to be behind the wheel? How do we create a team around that in a support network? So today we're going to have that conversation. I want to invite you to put your information, share who you are in the chat. This is the Movement Cafe, which is a place where we are kind to each other, where we celebrate the movement of creation justice, environmental justice, and people in the United Methodist Church. Um, I am from Oregon. I actually live in Southern Oregon, unfortunately, land of fires, but we have a beautiful day today with no smoke and clean, fresh air. So I am rejoicing today how good everything is. Let us know, are you an earth keeper? Do you have a green team at your church? Would you like to become an earth keeper? If so, I just noted that Jonathan Brake logged in. He is now in the chat. Give him a chat. He'd love to hear from you and invite you and tell you more about the earth keeper training. I know there's already lots of earth keepers on the call as well. So with that big welcome, I want to just invite you to learn more about the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement and what we all do together from this whole denomination. And to do that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy. So go ahead, Kathy.
Hi, folks. It's great to see so many coming on today. This will be an exciting conversation. I'm Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt. I'm a Earth Keeper and a layperson in the Minnesota Annual Conference and one of the many leaders of the growing creation justice movement that's part of the United Methodist Church. So you've maybe heard me say in the past, if you've been on these calls before, but for those who haven't, or even as a refresher, the creation justice movement is now about 4 years old, believe it or not. It emerged out of other work that has been happening for decades, really, in the United Methodist Church, because this denomination has long had a vocation for creation justice, for working to work on improving and healing our relationship with the planet and with each other. But as more and more folks identified the urgency of things like climate change, the folks came together and said, we have to do more. And we found each other at Earth Keepers trainings, at conferences and summits, at various gatherings of our boards and agencies. And as we discovered each other, we said, we need to do more. We need create some structures to help do that. And that's how the creation justice movement really has emerged. And we've organized ourselves in online work teams that have benefited from the beauty of being able to work together through online presences like Zoom, through places like our website and our communication channels. And we've been able to do quite a bit of work in that. And we're now really kind of building on of those resources. So today will be really kind of a continuation of all of that really goal of using the structures of this denomination to further our efforts to heal the relationship with our planet. And in particular, to build off of the promises that passed at General Conference in April and early May, that there's the kind of dreams of what might pass General Conference and that did pass. Now we have the hard work of making it real. And so that's what this conversation will be about. Many have been leading us to kind of put together resources that will help folks do this work. And we will be building on the relationships and partnerships that we have with boards and agencies and the work teams that were created. But I want to also say this will require new things, new relationships in our conferences, in our partnerships. It's going to require us to say, well, this resource is missing. Who can help create it? So as you do this work, as you listen to this conversation today, what are the questions that you have? What are the needs you have in your context? Please let us know and help us create the responses to those. Because that's what we're doing as a movement is building this together, as Rashinda said. So that's all I'll say for now. I'm going to turn it back to Rashinda, who's going to guide us through the process and lead us into the different speakers for today.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. So yes, are you excited yet? This is just such a generative conversation. Now, of course, when you start with something, it's helpful to get a sense of what the history of something is. And so we have with us JD Hansen, and he is going to offer a few minutes of, sort of what is the history of this. JD is policy director for Center of Food Safety. He's a member of the Mount Olive United Methodist Church in Arlington, Virginia. And he's former staff executive for environmental justice at the General Board of Church and Society. He serves on the board of Caretakers of God's Creation. And the legislation that we're talking about today came from his heart and hands. And he wrote that down and sent that off. And look what happened. So, JD, go ahead.
Well, some of you may remember the story of Joseph in the Bible. And there, I believe it's Genesis 30, it says, "And there arose in Egypt a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph." Well, what that meant was that things changed, and things change in the church all the time. And unless you have commitments from leaders to keep doing things, they won't keep doing them. In 1986, the General Board of Church and Society had a committee on environmental justice and, love the last part of it, and planetary survival. And the board later changed the name away from planetary survival and just left it as the Committee on Environmental Justice. Turns out with climate change, we maybe want to bring back that planetary survival idea. In 1986, when the Board of Church and Society had its first national convening of conference chairs of environmental justice, there were 46 chairs in 1986. And the Board of Church and Society had 5 full-time staff people working on environmental justice. And then we had changes in general secretaries and other expectations, and the staffing of environmental justice work got down to 1/10 of one person, and nobody was staying in touch with annual conference environmental justice coordinators. And so when annual conferences appointed people, they weren't giving reminders to appoint people. So some of us that were on the national board of Caretakers of God's Creation, after the 2016 general conference when the general conference wouldn't vote a ban on fossil fuels in the church's investments. Decided that part of the problem was we didn't have enough organization in annual conferences. So we went to the language of the discipline that specified that the Board of Church and Society and all of the annual conferences needed to have a Peace with Justice coordinator, and copied that language so that it now reads: the Conference Board of Church and Society or equivalent structure shall also name a Caretakers of God's Creation coordinator who will be responsible for helping the conference develop programs to help it become more ecological sustainable and address environmental injustices. In short, what this does is make this position a requirement, not a nice add-on for an annual conference, but even an annual conference that doesn't have a Board of Church and Society, the equivalent body of the Board of Church and Society shall name a Caretakers of God's Creation coordinator. And they will be different in every annual conference, but this is a shall, not a, it would be a nice idea. So if your annual conference doesn't have one, the general conference, on the floor of general conference, they voted 667 for this and 54 against it. So it got pretty close to a ringing endorsement from the general conference, and you can share that with your annual conference. I think I've used my time.
You're awesome. Yes, absolutely. Do you hear that? The sort of little bit of tension there between you shall and please do, you're invited. That tension exists always in the UMC because part of our strength is a sort of grassroots, or like to say, church roots aspect of who we are together, which means that sometimes we can get ornery and decide we want to do it our own way. And that's actually a good thing because you know your context and your church and your people best. So there's flexibility built into this, but also we got to do this, right? For what is it, you JD, like not pulling any punches there, planetary survival. The planet actually will be fine. It will do its thing, but oh my goodness, what a loss of the gifts of life there will be if we do not act. Okay, so let's hear from folks who are actually kind of right in the middle of this exact kind of work. So I'm going to turn it over to Grace and Kim, who will be sharing some kind of back and forth together. Go ahead, Grace. Yeah, you're starting off. Okay, good. Yes, go ahead.
I think we switched things around, Rashida.
I think so. Thank you.
And then I'll hand it off to Grace here when we get going. I'm going to share my screen to get things started, I hope. So, hi, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here today. It's really exciting to have the opportunity to talk more about this position that has been created. You know, as JD just mentioned, this isn't a suggestion. This is it shall happen. So this position has been firmly established within the hierarchy of each annual conference, the requirement to do this. But as they try to fill this position, or if someone is considering entering into this position, we thought that it might be really nice to have some guidelines, some things that people could look at and say, oh, okay, I can do that, rather than having to start from ground zero. So we took, since many people in the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement are already doing this work, we put our heads together and came up with some suggestions for things that people in this position could do to make it a successful position. So the first paragraph, and I think I'm sure that they're going to send out the link that has the full position description, but I'm going to show you each of it in turn and then just talk about it generally. But the first paragraph of the position description really is an overview of what the position has been defined to do. So since it's within this hierarchy of the annual conference, it very much gives access to the coordinator, to the staff of the annual conference, as well as to the resources of the annual conference and those working within the United Methodist boards and agencies. So they're firmly described, they're established, but it also gives credibility as they begin to try to reach out and spread this information out to those within the annual conference, whether it's clergy or laity, whether it is somebody at the district or the conference staff level. And so the coordinator position will really be viewed as a hub, as a place where information will flow in about creation, care, and justice. They will go out and seek it. Information will flow in, and then they will distribute that out to others who can use it. And it's important then, as the coordinator, to know what resources and programming are out there and then make them available to and accessible by others in the annual conference. So in order to do this, we actually came up with a number of suggestions for the coordinator to do to accomplish this. The very first thing, which I think is great news for every coordinator, is you shouldn't try to do this alone. It is really something that lends itself only to a team effort. There's just so much work out there to do, whether it's a paid position as a coordinator or whether it is a volunteer position. You need support. You need a team. So you want to identify your team and bring them in. You also want to build all of your work on a firm foundation. That's good theology, as we all know. And then we also want to fully incorporate the Christian ethic of creation, care, and justice throughout all the efforts to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. So in other words, the coordinator would want to work towards not making this viewed as a specialty ministry, but as something that permeates the entire mission of our denomination. And you can do that by integrating it into all aspects. So one of the first things that needs to be done is really, rather than starting from ground zero and building all of this on your own, the coordinator would want to tap into what's already been done, what's already working, and they begin networking. And so if you network and find out from others what is happening, you can build on that. You can accept what you want to use for each of these things. And one of the best things, and I'm not getting paid to say this, but the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement is one of the best locations for a repository for all these resources and all this information. Whether it's someone who is, they have links to the boards and agencies, they have contacts there, but they also are a grassroots movement that has contacts in so many different local churches, your district staffs, your conference staffs, and you can build on that. And then other locations, we've got listed. You just don't want to confine yourself to the United Methodist Church box. You want to go outside into other groups who are doing this work as well and tap into them. And then you also want to identify within your annual conference those who are passionate about this work and who can be the ones that you can actually organize and engage with at the local church level or in your district and conference staffs so that you can get things out. So now you have the partnerships and the resources and you begin building your information. Now you want to push all of that information out. You want to share it. You want to do your outreach. And so you begin doing things, and I'm not going to just read them to you, but you want to be visible. You want to be out there. You want to start promoting the resources, whether it's online or through your annual conference meetings where you promote resolutions and conference communications, district communications, have events, speakers, all kinds of things to get this information distributed throughout the annual conference at all levels. And one part of this work, not one part, a big part of this work is education and raising awareness about the issues and the resources and everything that's there. But in turn, you also want to take that one step further and make sure that we are not just educating and raising awareness, but that we are moving people to action. And they are changed actions. And so, you know, we already have a number of things on the books, so to speak, within the United Methodist Church. And it's important to make people aware of those items that say those are our aspirations. But we also need to make everyone aware of that ambition gap between our performance and our aspirations, and work in this position to close that gap and to get others who are engaged in this. And a good place to start is with all the great legislation that just passed recently at General Conference. So you're serving as the hub. You also, part of this is to hold the annual conference itself, responsible for the legislative goals that have been established by the greater church and by the annual conference. So once again, it's making sure that the performance is met. And then recognizing that all of our individual actions are very important, but many changes need made at the systemic level, or at the macro level, or at the national and international level. And so advocacy work is highly important. You want to get your people reaching out to lawmakers and to corporations to encourage change. And then through all of this, assure a clear focus on any anti-racist policies and practices as the work is being done, because environmental racism is still a very big part of our world today. So I'm going to be in one of the breakout rooms. If you have any other questions on this, I'm going to turn it over to Grace now, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about the practicalities of the position.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm going to also share screen, mostly just to keep myself on point so that I don't start rambling. So it's wonderful to be with you today. I'm Grace Pugh Hubbard, and I'm a climate care coordinator for the New England Annual Conference. And I've been in this position since July 1 of 23. So I've just come on my 1-year anniversary. And so our conference decided a couple of years ago to try to commit to working for creation care. And this was done through a resolution in the 2022 annual conference that was presented by our Board of Church and Society. And so the legislation that was laid in the foundation for encouraging local churches realizes ways they could take meaningful part of care for God's creation, very concrete ways like complete an energy audit, practice recycling, consult your interfaith power and light chapter, reduce single-use items, use virtual meetings whenever possible, or carpool, be responsible with ecological design, and vote and advocate, and then an observation of Earth Day in there. So along with those suggestions in the resolution was also the creation of a conference creation task force, and the hiring of the position that I hold currently. So our task force is made of representatives from each of our 6 states and seven districts. And this group was just recently filled out earlier this year, and they've self-identified as the Creation Care Circle. They feel that Circle is a more appropriate name. And we're trying to have representation across the conference, and we meet monthly. We had determined our vision and mission and our governance framework, and now we're ready to jump in and see what that good work will be. We've already been doing some of that. So as per the job description that I inherited, I worked with 3 areas of engagement, and Kim spoke to this too, about education and awareness for climate justice and creation care, energy efficiency opportunities for local churches and their members, legislative advocacy for healthy climate legislation on the local, state, national, and international levels. So with Education for Resources, we're gathering resources around our conference. A big part of this job has been networking and communication and laying the groundwork and seeing the work that's already been done so we don't reinvent the wheel and we celebrate the good work that's already been done down the pike. And with education, of course, we lean into our larger agencies and try to pull, and I find there's no trickle down. It's sometimes the information gets stuck, but part of my job is to milk, if you will. I feel like I'm pulling it out down from the larger agencies and distributing it. So it's coming down to us and then out into our local churches. Even though we have conference newsletter and we have district newsletters, things just don't always get where they need to be. So a large part of this job that I have is effective communication. And I found many ways that doesn't work. So we're trying to find the ways that do. Also within our conference, trying to gather master gardeners, river keepers, beekeepers, environmentalists, naturalists who are already active professionally, and lean on them for helping to teach us and work together. With energy efficiency, there's a checklist for parsonages, about 14 things that you can do that just make sense. Like if you're going to walk through your house and save on your electricity, you'd turn off the light. You might replace your air filters. So things like that, just a checklist for churches to do. And then after those things, move into more advanced actions if you want, with solar and heat pumps, things like this. So communication is very important. I began this job 12 months ago with a 12-month goal list. And much of those goals were around networking and effective communication. So the Reverend Kim Horning Marcy already had a blog going in our creation care since COVID. And then I took up and we try to complement each other on content. So every month we each have a blog. And the conference creation care page, I'm responsible for maintaining that. Well, our conference communications director maintains it, but as far as content, I'm able to add things there. We have all kinds of resources for advocacy and state efficiency opportunities. With the interconference work, I've been meeting intentionally with groups, and what I mean by that is finding those groups, putting myself in the path and asking who can I come talk to, and that just goes word of mouth. And also working with our Creation Care Circle members, and working with them, I'm trying to lean on the idea that I want to work with their passions and their interests. Everybody doesn't do everything. And so I think Dr. Catherine Hayhoe says, what are you good at? What do you love to do? How can you use those two things to help with creation justice as we move forward? So I'm really trying to work with vested interest in people and help them develop programming and outreach there. And also the building of specific databases to me has been very crucial, because I find that we're just inundated with information, and to get a random email has a very small amount of response as opposed to individual invitations to join a group. And also we are working with these wonderful pages, wonderful different agencies, Creation Justice Movement there in the center. And I jumped in with this group, just sort of went to a meeting and asked if I could be part of it. And it was so inviting. So I would really encourage you, or the people who you encourage in your conference, to start here. It's just a wonderful grassroots place to learn so much. So many resources are already here. Of course, Word of Discipleship, Global Ministries, Church and Society, United Women in Faith, with their Just Energy for All program. Another thing is, within our conference, weekly staff caucus is very important, and I've been allowed to come to that, which is just beautiful. And this is what Kim was talking about, getting in on the conference level and having access to those. But anyway, I won't read the litany, but from camping to trustees to the foundation, to the disaster response team. And then ecumenical organizations. Don't forget to reach out, especially for advocacy with your councils of churches, with your state level interfaith power and light, because people are already working in these areas. And what I find is there's so much work to do. Don't reinvent the wheel. Find where the work is already being done and tap in and work alongside. Earth Keepers, I push Earth Keepers everywhere I go. Very important program. We have 15 Earth Keepers in New England, and part of my job, I feel called very much to grow that number as we network together, especially with this becoming a general conference legislation, that we need to be able to reach across conference lines and talk with one another and communicate. And you know what? I think I'm probably to the end of my time. So I'm going to stop right there and look forward to talking with some of you in the breakout room later. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, yeah, pulling out this idea of the permeating. I love when Kim said that the permeates all of what we do as a church. This is so deeply theological and biblical and about life itself. How could it not be? So I really appreciate that. A couple of things I also appreciated with Grace talking about the mistakes. She mentioned something about starting education and learning from the mistakes. Well, my goodness, if we that is 3/4 of the work. We are building a new path. We're going to find all sorts of things on that path. And we're going to try this. And what works in one context isn't necessarily going to work in another context. So just that is the work. And that is how the path gets made and how they're doing so well in New England. And the third point that I wanted to make, I have already forgotten just because of how cool those first two things were. I was just so excited. But thank you so much to Kim and Grace. They will be in a breakout room, and they're just a wealth of information and part of the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. So if you're doing this work, if you care about this work, and I know a lot of you that are here today, come be part of this group. I want to turn it over next to Kathy to talk more about what resources. So since General Conference, boy, the run up to General Conference was like busy, busy, busy as we're getting all that worked out. And then afterwards, it's like, what? It all worked. It worked. We did it. And now is the work of unrolling it. And so Kathy and the group here have been busy unrolling, and Kathy's going to talk a little bit about what that unrolling looks like.
Thanks, everybody. It's so exciting to see, first of all, so many people joining and continue to join, and to see in the chat the work that you're all beginning and doing and continuing. And I thank you, Grace and Kim, for your leadership in it kind of being some of the beginning work on what this could look like at the conference level. One of the key roles I've played in the Creation Justice Movement is on the communications team, because we knew that from the beginning, one of the things that was needed is kind of a central place to go to connect with the resources that are in the denomination, and also to identify what isn't out there and to help showcase those new resources as they're being developed. So what I'd like to actually do today is give you a little tour of the website, because it can be really overwhelming, all the things that are out there. And I want you to have one place to go. And this is an evolving resource, but I want you to, if you go to that place and not find something, please reach out, because either it needs to be created, or maybe we just haven't done a very good job of organizing it on the website, and we'd love your feedback. So so go with me on this little tour of the website and some of the mini resources that do exist now, and the links, and so that you can find them in the future. So our website is umcreationjustice.org. And on that page, you will find very highly some of the main resources just right across the bottom, as well as across the menu on the top. And so that's really the place to start. It's the place to sign up for our newsletter, to see previous versions of the newsletter, to read stories from the blog that are mostly showcased in the newsletter. You can at any point search for something. If you're like, oh, I wonder what they have on green teams, or I wonder what they have on solar, just stick a word into there, and hopefully it'll pop up with a whole list of things that are already there. In the last, one of the first things that was put together actually in 2018, when the Creation Justice Movement was just still an idea, for the summit that happened in Minnesota in 2018, we thought, as Kim alluded to, there's this gap between the words of the church and our actions. So we thought we would start by compiling those beautiful words of all the things that the United Methodist denomination already has as that represent this vocation of creation justice. And so that this page now, it's a link under About. It's now the statements of the UMC under About. You can find this page, and it's been updated. So but it's not complete. And so if you see something that you think should be added to it, but I want to let you know some of what's already there. We have a few statements from John Wesley, who was a strong proponent of working with and loving nature. There are statements from the United Methodist Church has the communications has a page that has links across the denomination. The Council of Bishops has a statement from the call to action, which is actually now archived, but we have the archive. We have a link to that here. So if you're looking for that statement that came out, I believe it was 2008, and the resources there, we have that linked here. But more recently in 2021, they had a statement about the climate crisis, and that's linked there as well. As many of you know, the social principles were revised at General Conference, so we have a link to the full copy of those revised social principles with just a short teaser on the part that's on the community of all creation. And there's a few articles that are about that particular part of the social principles that we have done since General Conference, and so we kind of point you in the direction of those resources for those words. The Book of Discipline also has quite a few statements. These are some from prior to General Conference. This is one from on the local church that we just discovered, actually, and very exciting to see that a key part of the discipline's role in terms of the local church is to defend God's creation. So just those kind of words can have weight as you try to roll out this work. The many changes that happened at General Conference are available in our website. So there's a General Conference updates page, kind of a list, a core of actual words from the legislation that was passed. We'll continue to refine those resources, but these are some of the changes, starting with this one that we're talking about today. And then last, in terms of this page, the general boards and agencies and seminaries all have resources and materials, as do our annual conferences. So I'm going to go to those pages next. If you click on this one, the board and agencies and seminary connections all have a wealth of resources information. In particular, I would refer you to the interagency commitment to just and equitable net zero emissions that now has kind of updated links to the resources of all the boards and agencies. But, you know, key partners in this work have been Church and Society, Global Ministries, the Board of Higher Education, United Women in Faith. What needs to be added here is discipleship ministries as well. And then our seminaries are also developing key programs around this work, and encourage you to reach out to whatever seminary is closest to you and see what they're doing, because I'm sure that they're doing something. Our goal is to continue to update this. So if there's updates that you would like to see made to that section, please do that. Another key piece of the structure of the United Methodist Church, and again, all of this is under About on this page. If you go under About, you're going to see the annual conference connections, the board and agency connections, the statements, all of that's there. But as we've been talking about with this role, a key part of it is the organizing that's happening in our annual conferences. And so one of the first things that this creation justice movement has been doing is identifying the teams in the various jurisdictions that we already know exist. So if you know that there's a team in your conference and it's not listed here, please let us know. We just added one recently. And so we want to make sure that they're added. If you don't have one yet, then this is the place to go to get resources to help start one. There is a workshop series that was put together a few years ago that you can watch on kind of how to do organizing your annual conference. There are resolutions that have been collected. There are model resolutions as well. So please, and then stories of kind of updates from the conferences that have had. So this work is underway, and there is lots of inspiration to be had if you're not already actively involved in your conference. The next page, I guess I wanted to, so I've talked about, sorry to keep jumping around here. I've talked about the things under About, the the work teams and the conference connections and the boards and agencies and the statements. But one of the other pages I refer you to is resources. And the resource link starts out by having this whole library of worship materials and curriculum. Some of the new things from the season of creation worship is right at the top there, but there's also some study guides around the legislation from the from General Conference. And so just go there and find those resources. But also newly under resources, I've just added a link to some materials that were put together for green teams. So starting at the local church, knowing that's a key place for this organizing, we last November put together a list of just all the resources that we know of, and we know it's not complete. In fact, there's a new resource that just came out from Discipleship Ministries led by our own Chris Zinkowitz on the Be a Disciple course on an effective way. And we need to add that effective way to do green teams. We need to add that to this list. But there's a lot here, including links to the Earth Keepers training, the materials for creation justice tips, some trainings that annual conferences have offered. And I want to just lift up the Loving People and Planet program. That is a good way. If you need a place to start, that's a good way to do that through your conference and get those resources started. In addition to that, I also was talked about advocacy. We have a strong advocacy team that regularly lifts up actions for our newsletter each month. And that team has put together both a place to, where you can go to where some of the current action alerts are, but also kind of guiding principles for advocacy. And that team would also welcome people to join it. So encourage you to check out that page. Is also on the website under Take Action for advocacy. The very newest thing, and then I'm going to be done, is whereas we try to roll out this caretaker position, we've put together a page. I want to give Rashinda a shout out, but Rashinda and Karin and Mel, who were involved in drafting this initial page, as just a kind of a roadmap. So this page is also, like I said, under resources, caretaker coordinators. Our intent is to continue to build the resources as we go ahead, but this is kind of the one place you can go to find a lot of those links I just mentioned. The link to the legislation and the actual words of that statement. If you click on that, you get to this, I'm sorry, not that document, this document that has the all of the exact words of that statement of all of the legislation that passed General Conference. And so that's a useful place to just get the exact study what actually happened. And then the other thing that's linked here, you'll see this lovely graphic that allows you to just kind of see kind of where all some of the moving pieces here. But as you're starting the process, there's how do you go about that? The job description materials that Kim talked about are linked in here, and that's what this document is that kind of suggested responsibilities of a caretaker position. So there's all the things you could do as like to try to get that coordinator position in place. And we'll hear more about this from Karin in a moment. So I'm not going to go through the details of it, but I just wanted to give you the navigation here. There's how to start the process of hiring. Once you have one, or if you are one, those coordinators position, here's some of the work to do. And then the last piece of that is kind of what are some of the connections that can happen that you are recommended to do, because clearly this is not something that you do alone. So again, if you don't remember nothing else, go to umcreationjustice.org, search for those things under the navigation. If you can't find it, let me know, let us know, because it needs to be easier to find. And if you find a resource that needs to be added or the one that's missing, also let us know so that we can continue to build these resources to continue moving the movement forward. And I am going to stop sharing and send it back to you, Rashinda, for the next step.
Awesome. Yes. And I'm just take a minute to plug a couple of things. One is there's 2 brand new study guides out. One is the legislation that was passed, which includes the caretakers legislation. So if you're part of a hiring team or recommending team, that might be one of the first things you might want to do is bring a group through that study guide. And it gives you an overview of what kinds of things might be necessary or needed underneath that umbrella. And then there's also a net zero study guide, which speaks specifically to the net zero actions taken by General Conference, including Church and Society's new energy policy, which it includes And so that's kind of a next step once you get things like green teams and things going like that. And next cafe, our very next one next month, we will be talking. We touched on net zero before. That's going to be a really important recurring thing, and we're going to be talking about it again. So yeah, I think there was a couple of things too that we had tweaked since that 101 resource went out. Kathy, one of the things we want to do is that nominations team. Sometimes that's a real real thing for us Methodists. Oh, nominations superficial. And one of the problems with challenges, I would say, in our conferences is it tends to sometimes be the same group of people over and over again at the top who do things. What we need is everybody doing this. So instead of just a few people getting their 10,000 hours and becoming experts in this work, we want everybody to get their 10,000 hours. And that means that it's not so much a nominating team process as it is a church roots, grassroots, a local church circle, creation care circle. I loved that, Grace. That's the work where we're ensuring that this, like Grace said, it doesn't trickle down. It gets stuck. And what we're going to do is we got to come from both directions, right? We got to get the bishops to do what they should be doing. And really encourage the local church that they can do this work, that there is funding, there is opportunity, there's so much love. We love this world and this planet and each other, and we can express that this way. Okay. So I want to then turn it over to Karen. And it's true that I messed around with this 101, but really Karen and Mel put this together. And so Karen, I want to invite you to share a little bit more about that 101.
Sure, I'd be happy to. You've actually already heard a lot of the information that's there. But just to give you a background, as we were putting together the job description through the annual conference organizing team, and the subgroup from that team, Grace and Kim and Rob and a number of other folks, we thought that it would really be helpful not just to have the job description, but to really have almost a checklist of, all right, your annual conference is going to put this together. How do you go about doing that? And so to really take people through step by step. And I'm hopeful that I can screen share here. And I'm just going to go back to the screen that Kathy had already shown us. And that is this screen with our graphic talking about the caretaker coordinator's position and some of the elements that are key to be thinking about with regards to this position. So the first thing you're going to be looking at is how you're going to identify this person. Who's going to do that? Whether it's a nominating team, a hiring team, a recommending team, what's the process by which you're going to do that? Who are you going to be looking for, so that committee, that group of people needs to be identifying what is it that they want out of this creator position, and to begin to identify who might possibly fill that. So we recommended that they also review that legislation from General Conference that called for the creator position, coordinator position, I should say, and also review the job description materials so that they're as familiar as possible with what kinds of folks they should be looking for. And then go through the process of whether they're actually nominating somebody or hiring somebody, identifying who that person is. Once that person's been identified, then we wanted to help that person to also then look at what are the steps that they need to be doing first. So gathering a creation justice team, who might serve on that? What kinds of things would you be looking for? Whether you're going to be looking for representation from every district, like some folks already are doing. I see Kara Fleischer's on. And they in Florida have long time had a committee and coordinator identifying people in every district. You heard from Grace the same thing, identifying people so that you have as much representation from all over. Reviewing the task as a team. What are some of the things that are going to be required? And you've heard Kim go into a fair amount of detail on that. You've heard Grace speak about that, but you'll see a listing of things here as well. So again, just giving you a guideline, a check sheet, if you will, step by step, so that as you're putting this together, you have that. Listening and learning together. What are some of the resources? Linking back to things in, for example, the library of the Creation Justice website, other available resources. Looking at how you might fund your work. So what resources are available through the conference, through agencies, through boards, through outside organizations, being very creative about that. And then also ways that the team can be visible in the annual conference so that people are aware of the work and can join in those efforts. And then finally, obviously, developing goals and a game plan. What's also important is that these coordinators are working together with other coordinators. So learning from one another, best practices, learning from one another as far as what has worked, what has failed. Because as we try new things, we all know we will have some failures, and that's okay. We have to accept that as we try new things, that may very well happen. But learning from one another, sharing those kinds of things, learning from our boards and agencies, as has already been lifted up. Earthkeepers, our Love Your Neighbor Coalition, our United Women in Faith, Global Ministries, lots of different possible resources there. And then engaging in partnerships with organizations outside the church as well. So again, this is on the website, and I would encourage everybody, as you are putting this position together, to review through it. Perhaps you've already got the position in place and you want to look at it and think, are we missing anything? We hopefully have a fairly comprehensive checklist here. We also, though, are very much open to anything you see or don't see there that we ought to be adding. So I think I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I want to thank Mel and Rashenda both for working hard on this, and hopeful that this will indeed be a very useful document for all of you as you're putting this position in place.
Awesome, Karen. So Mel, we just have a few minutes before we're going to be moving to the funding conversation, but go ahead.
Thank you so much. And it has been a real pleasure to work on this with Rashenda and Karen and others. I would say that one thing that we, as we move forward in creating these positions in each annual conference, there's no one size fits all. They're going to be different, and there are going to be differences across annual conference lines, and there are going to be things that we are continuing to learn as we implement this. But one of the things that I think is important is to help you understand the intersectionality with other agencies in your annual conference and throughout the church itself, and the communications that are so important. Kathy talked about how the UMCJM has communications, but those communications within your annual conference are going to be very important. And I would suggest that, well, because of disaffiliation, a lot of annual conferences are cutting budgets, and we're going to be talking about funding in a moment. But at the very least, whoever is in this position needs to have either a desk or an office in the annual conference. They need to have a dedicated email address. They need to have a dedicated voicemail. And there are a number of other things, but these are important communications tools which will enable you to communicate with all of the local churches in your annual conference. So I would say that because of the legislation that passed a general conference, the work of this position is going to be largely interpretive and is going to cross a lot of different boundaries as we cover a lot of areas together. So I'll leave it at that.
So very wise words spoken. This is, not everybody may be able to hire someone right off the bat. This may be a volunteer position. That volunteer needs access, visibility, and resources, because this is a for real, legit totally important. What are the other Gen X words I can use to get this going in our conferences for the sake of our children? I got a little Gen Alpha grandson. He deserves the same. He deserves clean water in the forests I used to run around in, same as every other child. So this is the work we have to do, and we have to get serious about this and close that gap. So a lot of times when I talk to people, in fact, every time pretty much I talk to people about this stuff, the funding issue comes up. It couldn't be more important to talk about funding, and especially as we want to encourage conferences to move into a funded position and recognize the importance of a volunteer if volunteers where we're going to start here. And so we've invited Pastor Sarah Allen to come and talk for a few minutes about funding. And it's also going to be a bit of a roundtable. Folks in this cafe, including you, I'm sure, have already wrestled with this funding conversation. And in every conference, it might look different. There's not a stamp for this. So, Sarah, I want to turn this over to you to just get this conversation started and kind of speak about what your experience has been in as an earthkeeper, just sort of jumping into imagining how funding, what funding could look like.
Thanks. Great to be here. My position previously was at McCurdy Ministries, which is a national mission institution. And I'll just give you 3 quick examples of funding that we were able to receive to help further this goal. We were a candidate for the IRS Renew America non-for-profit grant. We started with Mountain Sky because Mountain Sky was trying to include New Mexico in. They were awarded, but they cut out New Mexico. But we were fortunate that we were able to be picked up by the group that funded New Mexico. So we are going to have one of our 40-year-old buildings have a new heating and air conditioning system, insulation and windows, which is going to make that building much more usable. And so we're grateful for that, not to have to go through the thought of tearing it down and getting a new building, which had been kind of in the back of our heads, not knowing that we could restore that building. We also worked with 5 different groups: Earth Keepers, United Women in Faith, Just Energy for All, our United Women in Faith in New Mexico conference, one of our church donors, and an individual donor to come up with $35,000. Sometimes you look at some of these grants and, you know, 10,000 from Earth Keepers and 2,000 from Just Energy for All, and you think, oh, well, what can I do with that? But sometimes if you're creative, you can think about linking these things together. And we were able to come up with $35,000, which is funding a solar carport, which will fund our not-for-profit free counseling service that we have for our students. So that's going to, you know, save us $400 a month and be just, you know, another way to make that program sustainable. Then we also are partnering with a group called 505, which recycles clothing specifically for students. And so this is, again, going to be a great project. It was originated in Albuquerque, and now we have it in Espanola to recycle clothing for students that otherwise can't necessarily afford new clothing for school. So we're very excited about that. So just to give you some background of some of the creative things that you can think about for your area. But when you're looking specifically for funding for this position, this is new groundwork. We're very fortunate that some conferences and individual jurisdictions have picked up some of the funding for this kind of position in the past. But looking at it as a more, you know, how do we get this position in every conference? The South Central jurisdiction that I'm a part of we're looking very creatively, and we're looking at several different mechanisms as we get ready to apply. Right now, we're doing the background work. You know, the job description's just been completed. We're going to be looking to talk with each individual bishop in the South Central jurisdiction to see if they're interested in partnering with us. And their partnering will be a commitment that they will commit to having this person actually be part of their cabinet and role. And so that they're making a commitment to helping get this person hired, to, you know, if they're going to be working from home, that they're going to have Zoom access to the conference, Zoom, all of those pieces, so that the bishops must take some responsibility in making this happen. So when you think about your own conference level, who can speak to the bishop about these items and get that level of commitment. Once we have an understanding from each of the bishops, we will be writing as a jurisdiction a larger kind of grant. We're looking at several different ways that we think we can fund this. The Texas Methodist Foundation is interested in partnering with us as a potential for a challenge grant to other organizations and funders throughout the jurisdiction to make that funding available for each of these positions in the conferences in our jurisdiction. We're also looking at Walmart. Walmart sometimes does chain funding, if you will, where that if you look at, most lead cities in those each conference has a Walmart where that is, so that you chain those together. And that may only be like a $5,000 grant from each of those Walmarts. But if that would be the travel money or the materials money for this position, that's a great start. The last thing we're really looking at right now is Lilly Foundation. One of the things that's kind of interesting is that Lilly, because of their weight loss medication that has made them millions and billions, has a large grant pool right now, and they're looking for grants of 10 million and above, so that when we chain these kinds of conference activities to a jurisdiction or even a larger group, then we can start thinking that we would be eligible for that level of funding, which almost never happens. So it's a great opportunity to look at, what's in your own area that might be willing to do something larger or just in your conference level. The other thing to think about is that, there is some conference funding available in many places. There's foundation funding. And also, if you think about your own church, there may be a large donor that would be interested in partnering in some of this. Every once in a while, like our McCurdy grant, we found a donor that was willing to fund $10,000 for that particular project. So don't discount individuals that might be willing to help your conference to do something bigger and bolder. And so those are just some ideas. There are obviously lots of different individual foundations that may be willing to help you on a conference level. But I think it's so key to get this person hired and actually be able to have the level of response ability to help foster this. My vision obviously is that each church would have either a United Women in Faith Green Team or an Earthkeeper or both, because I think that at the church level, we can get so much done. But at the conference level, being able to facilitate best practices and the enthusiasm and sharing resources is going to really make this sing. And so I'd be open to any other comments from the people on the roundtable to try to further this discussion, because it's so important.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, we're actually our time, this is the thing, our we tend to kind of use the time up, and we're getting close to where we're going to be moving to breakout groups, and Sarah will be part of that. I'm going to ask, from our presenters, Grace or Kim or Karen, Mel has a wealth of information, but he's also in Texas, so maybe I know that Grace, there was outright hiring in the PNW. There's an effort to have conversations conference wide about the budget, to really take a look at what is necessary in this moment. What is God calling us to in this moment? And how does our treasure, our gifts, our time meet this moment in time and this moment in God's time? So yeah, there's those so I want to invite one more person to kind of share about how funding worked for them. I don't know if Grace wants to do that, or Kim. I know that there's go ahead, Mel.
Well, I just want to say that I'm in the North Texas Annual Conference, but we're in the process right now of unifying 3 annual conferences, North Texas, Central Texas, and Northwest Texas. And we're looking at a huge swath of land this combined conference, which will be the Horizon Texas Conference, will be. And in meeting with our bishop back last fall to begin the discussions in this area, he told me point blank, we've had to cut our conference budget. We don't have the money to fund a position per se, but what he wanted me to do, and I began working on that, was making contacts with the other 2 annual conferences that we are unifying with. And so as we unify, we'll have more resources available to us, but we'll also have a much larger area to cover. And how to go about funding that, because of disaffiliations, we lost a significant number of churches in the larger area. But where to go for the funding, I think Sarah has laid out just an incredible map for us to follow. And the resources that she brings to our jurisdictional team, and this is where this discussion began, was in our South Central Jurisdiction cohort, which meets every month. And so we've got people who are working across the board on looking at solutions. And so as we look at these solutions and what can be possible going forward, we just have to dedicate ourselves and look at every possibility.
Absolutely. And if you look at the 101, you'll see on at part, the flying of the birds up from the recommendation team, a list of different things you could use in advance. If you're going to go with grants, you're going to need to find grant reporting and grant management systems that the church, frankly, is not equipped for. So this is something that we want to actually make sure that we're doing this the right way, learning about what it looks like when you bring on a grant and the kinds of accountability structures that are required for that. So partnering with like IPL or partnering with, there's a Mountain Sky recently partnered with the University of Colorado. And actually they achieved a 5 million plus grant to look at energy efficiency across the churches. So now out of that money has to come administration. And that's where I think we're struggling as a church to make sure that if we're awarded $10,000, we have a way to pay to administer that grant. And that's why these partnerships are going to be really important. Kim, did you want to say one last thing before we move to breakout rooms? I saw your hand was up, but maybe you're already.
I think the time is up. I was just going to comment very briefly that we have, I'm in the Western North Carolina Conference, and we actually, to fund a paid position, mine is a volunteer position, but to fund a paid position, we combined with another annual conference, the North Carolina Conference, and funded a position for 2 years. This was prior to the passage of the petition. But each conference is donating half of the salary for that position to coordinate both conferences. So that's just one other option.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a lot of conferences now that do this shared, or they share with IPL, or they share with Church and Society. And I think too, one of the key things about this is money is hard. It's a hard thing, especially in the church. And so we're going to need to be creative, but we're going to need to be persistent. We have to be persistent and say, no, I know you have a million other things on your plate. None of those other things are possible if we don't deal with climate change. We literally don't get anything else we want if we don't deal with climate change. That has to be at the front of the budget. There's just no options. So that or we're a hospice church. So if we don't want to be a hospice church, then what we need to do is actually get into the business of the road to life again, right? Okay, it is breakout room time, and I'm actually going to turn it over to Kathy because she is the steward of the breakout rooms this time round. So go ahead, Kathy.
Great. Yeah. So we have 3 rooms and you get to choose which one you're in. The folks that will be in each one, there's rooms 1, 2, and 3. Actually, I think if I open it now, you can see them. The room 1 is going to have Kim and Sarah. So like in the kind of general sense of if you're at the beginning of this, where do you start to think about ideas for getting this going? Breakout room 2 is going to have Grace and Rob Barton, who's part of the Indiana conference, on if you already have an established team, what kind of do you do next if you already have a team? And breakout room 3 is on resources, and that will include JD, Mel, and Karin, particularly those from the Creation Justice Movement, but other resources as well. So go ahead and choose your room right now. It should be open on your screen. Welcome back. I know those conversations are, for some of you starting back, are generally are too short as you get started in conversations, but if there's any highlights you want to share, feel free to add them into the chat before we wrap things up for the day. But we'll be closing the conversation and continuing as we go. All right, everybody's coming back in now. Welcome back. If you have a highlight or two from your conversation in the small group, please feel free to add that into the chat. We don't really have time to do a sharing at this point, given that we're just a few minutes before the end, and we try to stay on track with our time, with our commitments. This conversation is recorded and will be shared as soon as it's available on the website under the same place where you found the information about the cafe. So please look for that, as well as in upcoming newsletters. And we will be continuing this conversation for sure. You know that all of the resources that are being developed will continue to be put forward. I want to just lift up one particular thing. If you're not already part of the annual conference organizing team, that's been a great space for annual conference leaders to learn from each other. And that meets once a month on the 3rd Monday of the month. Please reach out to myself or Karin Knucklefish in terms of getting invitation to that. We also have those jurisdictional spaces, so that may be another great space. Some meet monthly, like in South Central, and others meet more like quarterly, but that's another great space to connect with other leaders in the annual conference, as well as through the Earth Keepers movement and so forth. So please find ways to connect and to share your experiences and questions and to get involved as this conversation evolves.
Anybody in the South Central jurisdiction, we meet the 2nd Tuesday of each month at 3 p.m.
And under the annual conference organizing page that I forward, there's a list to, you can find the jurisdictional connections for your area as well, or is available there. Any other last words? And then I'm gonna turn it to Dawn to close us out with a prayer. This is such exciting good work, and so pleased to have you all here today.
All right. Okay, so this is a prayer that actually came from COP27. So let's go ahead and pray. Our Heavenly Father, please help us to deepen our gratitude for all you have made and awaken in us a renewed commitment to care for the earth and each other. Give us all the tools to listen to those most affected by climate change and with courage to act urgently and wisely so that our common home may be healed and restored and all people and generations to come may delight in it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, everyone. So grateful to have you on. We'll see you at the next Movement Cafe in a month. That's when we'll be focusing on some of the net zero. And there's also, watch your emails for a bonus Movement Cafe that's going to be happening on September 12th. I meant to mention it earlier, but it's about faithful voting. So watch your email. If you've got any information about this event today, you'll hear about that one. But mark your calendar for September 12th. 5 p.m. Eastern time, and that will be on faithful voting. So glad to have you all here, and see you all next time.